Now, there was a man named James who had gone to Great Lakes, Michigan, and Preston, a naval officer, had taken him in as a boarder 4 years ago, just before James' books took off. James, a man of God who got saved at a young age, recently started to prosper from his books. And as a writer, he humbly chooses to reside in the home of his mentor until the time is right for him to leave. And that home is the home of Preston, who is one of the highest ranking officers in the Navy. Now, Preston saw that James was a man of God and noticed the prosperity in his writing. So James impressed Preston and gained his utmost trust. He made James overseer over his house that had many servants, and he put all that he owned into the responsibility of James. So when Preston left for an assignment in Israel, he left James in charge of his affairs. Now, James was a handsome and attractive young man in form and appearance. After several weeks, Preston's wife started to look at James with desire. See, she had always been a woman with loose convictions and had several affairs while Preston was off on assignments around the world. And to her, this time was no exception. And she bluntly came to James and said, "Make love to me." But he refused her advances and said to her, "Look, with me in the house, Mr. Preston doesn't and shouldn't have to concern himself with anything because he's placed everything that he owns in my hands. He has trusted me more than any person ever has, and nor has he kept anything from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do this horrible evil and sin against God and your husband?" But she refused to listen to his reasoning because for her, he became even more attractive because of his burgeoning success as a writer, and she was always attracted to successful men or their potential even more so, and pestered him day after day after day, but he didn't listen to her, and he did his best as to not get aroused with her flirting and provocative clothing she would parade around in front of him. Then it happened one day that James was working on a new book of his, and none of the men of the household was there because Preston's wife made sure of this. And as he came out from a study room to use the bathroom, she came from behind him and pulled his shirt, saying, "Lie with me." But he ran and a piece of his shirt tore in her hand as he ran outside the house. When she saw that he had left a piece of his shirt in her hand and had run outside, she figured to use this against him because she thought, how dare he not succumb to her warning him? The next day she called to the men of her household, and they were the gardeners, cooks, and butler, and said to them, "Look at this. Your good friend James tried to make advances toward me and force himself on me. And when he did, I screamed. And when he heard me screaming, he ran from me, and I happened to tear off a piece of his shirt trying to get him off of me. And that's when he ran outside." The men of the house pretty much didn't believe her story, knowing James's character, and they especially knew how she was. And the butler asked, "If this is so, then why haven't you called the police?" And she exclaimed that she wanted to wait for Preston to get back home. So when Preston came home, she told him, saying, "James, who you trusted with everything you own, including your precious wife, tried to seduce me and attempted to rape me. Then, as soon as I raised my voice and screamed, I tore a piece of his shirt, trying to get him off of me, and he ran outside." And when Preston heard the words of his wife saying this, saying that this is the way your protege treated me, Preston was incensed. So Preston, confused and angry, did not take into account of the character of James, nor the loose nature of his wife. So Preston had him arrested on attempted rape charges. So now we fast forward a year later. While in prison, the Lord was with James and extended loving kindness to him and gave him favor in the sight of the warden. The warden committed to James was in charge of prisoner management of all the prisoners who were in the prison, so that he was able to move about the prison however and wherever so he pleased. As several years passed, his popularity increased. It increased to the point that he secretly became a spiritual advisor to elected officials, whereas through the Lord he also had a penchant for interpreting dreams. He was in such high demand that eventually he was pardoned. So in conclusion, this story was based on actual events because this story is about Joseph from Genesis chapter 39. It shows that whatever story or situation in the Bible, it can be applied for today, no matter how old the concept. The books of the Bible are never outdated. People in the Bible were flawed, they were not superhuman, and whatever power they appeared to exhibit came via God the Father. And in this case, Joseph had the strength not to give into adultery and not to give into lust. He stayed true to himself. He stayed true to Potiphar. And most of all, he stayed true to God. And the strength he exhibited was to run. He ran away from the lust. He ran away from the temptation. Most men will give into the temptation of a woman being scantily clothed and give into the lust of her desiring him, which will always boost a man's ego. And a man's ego and lust are a trigger point for Satan to play upon. Joseph showed that any man can have the strength required to endure when they trust in God. And yes, even the wisdom to do a simple thing like run. Yes, he was imprisoned, and yes, he did several years. And no, by all means, no one ever wants to do time for a crime they didn't commit. Sometimes God allows us to go through things for our own betterment. And in the end, Joseph's faith definitely carried him through, because I'm sure, like anyone, he was asking God, why am I going through this? But he remained upbeat, and through it all, he constantly found favor amongst those around him. And because of his upbeat attitude and faith, it extremely lessened the trauma of being imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit. And he was awarded a piece of heaven while being in the flesh. Enough said. Fantline.com is where you need to be if you're about growth and evolving as a person. And Fantline.com is about truth. Oh no, not my truth, God's truth. And if you're not about God's truth, then this isn't the website for you. If you're into gossip, then this isn't the website for you. And if you're not into learning and growing as a person, then again, this isn't the website for you. So come on, have some knowledge dropped on you. Or are you scared of what you may find out? So go to Fantline.com, or if you're into a listening mode, go to my podcast at anchor.fm/Marvin-Fant for Fantline 100. Either way, you'll learn something, and every so often I'll give away cash prizes, but you'll have to check out Fantline.com. Enough said.